Cancer Alley in the South: Environmental Racism and Cancer Outcomes. The 85-mile stretch of the Mississippi from Baton Rouge to New Orleans is home to over 130 petrochemical companies. Texaco, Borden, Occidental Chemical, Kaiser Aluminum, Chevron, IMC Agrico, Dow, and DuPont are a few. They produce staggering amounts of waste, much of which they treat on site or spew into the air, land, and water. In 2002, that 85-mile stretch of the Mississippi from Baton Rouge to New Orleans had the second highest death rate from cancer in the United States. Most of the illnesses were due to the carbon-based petrochemical industry. For this reason, local residents have renamed this industrial corridor Cancer Alley. People living nearest the factories and waste dumps are sick and dying. Clusters of asthma, stillbirths, miscarriages, neurological diseases, and cancers have developed rapidly. In the towns of Denham Springs and Walker, 6 children who lived within 3 miles of an oil and chemical waste dump developed neuroblastomas, a rate 120 to 200 times higher than the norm. The cancers don't hit only humans. Florence Robinson, a biologist who lives just outside of Baton Rouge, put 2 dogs to sleep, 2 with breast cancer and 1 with liver cancer. In the town of Norco, 25 miles west of New Orleans, lies the community of Diamond. Diamond is squeezed between a Shell Motiva oil refinery and a Royal Dutch Shell chemical plant. Flares burn so brightly that street lights aren't needed at night. The noise is deafening, and the air smells of ammonia. Margie, a resident of Diamond, both her son and daughter have asthma, and she almost lost her daughter at age 7 because her lungs collapsed. Margie also lost a sister to sarcoidosis. Statistically, this rare inflammatory lung disease affects 1 in 1,000 Americans. However, in Diamond, there have been 5 known cases in a population of 500. Clusters of health problems develop as they do because people's exposure to chemicals varies greatly. This level of exposure depends not only on the distance they live from the waste dumps or petrochemical plants, but also on where they work and where their children play. The direction of the wind, the types of chemicals emitted, the length of time the waste accumulates, the flow of underground or surface water, whether local creeks flood into vegetable gardens, how often residents eat local fish and game, and whether the drinking water comes from wells or the Mississippi. In Cancer Alley, which hosts over 100 chemical, petrochemical, refining, and industrial plants, through the use of geographic information system mapping, it was found that polluting industries are located in sections of parishes that have high percentages of African Americans, low averages of household income, and the most residents without a high school diploma. This was especially seen in St. James Parish, where it was found that the areas that have the highest percentage of residents who are employed in the manufacturing industry tend to be the wealthiest in the parish, have the least number of African American residents, and have the most residents with the highest level of education. Black communities often become the dumping grounds for various types of unpopular facilities, including storage sites for toxic waste and dangerous chemicals, as well as paper mills and other polluting industries. In the community of Diamond, many residents are descendants of sharecroppers and slaves that grew up on small farms that have long since been gobbled up by industrial plants. Convent, a town in Cancer Alley, according to the EPA's toxic release inventory, more than 23 million pounds of toxins were released over Convent in 1994. The majority of these releases occurred in 2 zip codes, both majority black. Shintech, a Japanese company, was hoping to build the nation's largest polyvinyl chloride production plant in Convent. The plant would add 600,000 pounds of pollution to the already smoke-filled air, besides emitting vinyl chloride, which can cause cancer and a host of other medical problems. The company's property abuts 2 small black neighborhoods. 3 schools and a public housing facility stand nearby. Environmental justice activists provide toxic tours in Cancer Alley to tourists to address how racism and classism have created an environmentally unjust climate. The industries in Cancer Alley practice economic blackmail. The plantation owner in the rural parishes were replaced by the petrochemical industry executive as the new master and overseer. Petrochemical colonialism mirrors the system of domination typical of the Old South. In addition to poisoning the people, this new master is robbing many of the local residents, many of whom are descendants of slaves, of their ancestral homes. Environmental racism is now turning century old African American communities into ghost towns. Cancer Alley is marked by great wealth and terrible poverty. The immensely profitable industries along its banks are granted immunity from many taxes to entice them to this place, so the schools that should be thriving struggle. Many plants are built on the edge of black communities, yet most of the employees are white and go home to bright, white suburbs miles away. Environmental justice is defined by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. There are more than 150 petrochemical plants within a 60-minute drive of the lower Ninth Ward. These plants are responsible for 129 million pounds of toxic releases each year. The people who live with this 24/7 exposure live with toxic terror. Southeastern Louisiana is also home to more than 2,000 hazardous waste pits and toxic dump sites. The area also has more oil spills than any other in the nation. The cancer rate in the area is 3 times the national average. In Cancer Alley, the town of Bayou Corn is also being plagued by a man-made sinkhole. The ground under Bayou Corn contains a salt dome, and local industry has drilled down to extract brine used in chemical processing. On August 3, 2012, the side of a salt cavern deep below the surface gave away, causing a surface depression that quickly filled with water. This lake was about 300 feet across and perhaps as many feet deep. This allowed methane and oil that had been trapped near the edges of the dome to burst to the surface. The land on the surface began swallowing entire trees in seconds. The sinkhole grew wider and deeper, eventually attaining a depth of about 750 feet. Close to 7,000 barrels of oil have gushed from the sinkhole. The residents of Bayou Corn fear that they will face the same fear as the neighboring town of Grand Bayou. Grand Bayou is now empty after a methane leak from a well owned by a Dow chemical facility forced a permanent evacuation. Residents also speak of Lake Penior, about 45 minutes away. A 1980 sinkhole there is still causing problems for residents who complain of gas rising up near their homes. The world can see that when it comes to climate-related disaster response or dislocation, in the eyes of the carbon industry and those they finance to speak on their behalf, black lives don't matter. Superstorms like Hurricane Katrina have been and continue to be used in a conservative culture war that erects a soot screen to divert our nation's focus away from the carbon industry's contribution to climate change. And cities' divine intervention is the reason climate-related catastrophes exact such a heavy toll on America's poor and vulnerable underclasses.